That Tulsa Reserve deputy who mistakenly shot and killed an unarmed man earlier this month finally spoke up publicly today on the Today Show about the incident. Robert Bates, 73 years old, killed Eric Harris after mistakenly, he says, reaching for his gun instead of his taser. He explained himself on the Today Show today. Let's take a look at that first video.
First and foremost, let me apologize to the family of Eric Harris. You know, this is the second worst thing that's ever happened to me, or first, ever happened to me in my life. I've had cancer a number of years ago. I didn't think I was going to get there. Luckily, I was able to go to a hospital where I had hours of surgery. I rate this as #1.
Yeah, that's a rough
That guy went on the Today Show and talked about how hard his life is after he just killed someone. Yeah. This is the second worst thing that's ever happened to me. This didn't happen to you. You killed someone else. It happened to him. You killed him. It didn't happen to you. What the fuck? Are you kidding me? And what did Matt Lauer say back to him?
What kind of cancer was it? No.
Look. The judgment.
I have a tiny bit of sympathy. I should say I had more sympathy before that interview.
Yes, me too.
I have a tiny bit of sympathy because out of all, like, every week we cover cops who kill unarmed people. He at least was so shocked by what he did that he dropped the gun, said, "Oh shit, I've shot him." He didn't mean to. So I feel bad for him, but that can't have been his idea to bring up the cancer. I think he has a publicist or a PR person or one of the cops is giving him advice, and it's really crappy advice about how to pitch yourself as a victim.
He says, he starts off by saying, this is the second
That's a bad idea.
worst.
That's a bad idea.
Again, he's had over a week to think about what he's going to say, and the first thing he says is the dumbest thing you could possibly say.
Yeah.
This is the second worst thing that's happened to me.
Well, that interview is now the third worst thing that's happened to him, I think.
It's all about how hard this is on him. Everybody's rubbing his shoulders behind him. That is pathetic.
Yeah.
That is the opposite of what he should be doing.
But sometimes you reach down deep inside for a carefully crafted argument, but you instead come up with something like that, like when you reach for a taser and you pull out a gun, for instance. Sometimes we mess up.
Yeah, and that is what happened next, actually. Today Show host Matt Lauer asked him, how could you possibly make this completely fundamental mistake of mistaking your gun, your taser, for your gun? And he actually offered an explanation for that.
Would you do me a favor? Would you stand up for me for 1 second and show me where on your body, when you are in your uniform, you keep your taser and where you keep your weapon, your revolver? Can you stand up and show me?
Sure, you bet. My taser is right here on the front, tucked in a protective vest. My gun itself is on my side, normally to the rear.
And people are going to look at that, Mr. Bates, they're going to say, how could you make this mistake? How could you think you were going for your taser on your chest, tucked into that vest, and accidentally pull your weapon?
Well, let me say this has happened a number of times around the country. I have read about it in the past. I thought to myself, after reading several cases, I don't understand how this can happen. You must believe me, it can happen to anyone.
Yeah, see, I don't think it can happen to anyone, because first of all, the thing that I noticed is if you are supposed to be in this play along with the cops thing, why would you put your taser, which is supposed to be your non-lethal way of stopping a suspect, why would you put that somewhere tucked away where it's harder to get to than you would with the lethal source to stop a suspect that you have in your pocket?
Yeah.
Which is back here, which you would reach for, which any person would reach for. Why wouldn't you put your taser on the outside and your gun on the inside where it's a lot harder for you to get to and kill somebody with?
I don't know what the rationale is for where they put it. I assume that, I mean, we know that he potentially skipped over some of his certifications for the guns.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a second.
That is a result of official policy. I don't know why they've decided to put one in the vest and one on the side.
But you're presuming it's official policy.
I'm presuming,
okay.
Yeah. I honestly don't know. I have a hard time imagining how you could ever pull a gun and have a gun in your hand and not know that it's a gun. I don't think that it's impossible. I think it can happen. So I think it's true to that extent. But what he's referring to there, where he's read about it happening in a lot of cases, he's referring to this slip and capture concept that we talked about in the show yesterday, which is not a result of psychological research or anything like that. It was a police use of force consultancy firm which came up with this idea to protect the reputations of cops. So I do believe that it can happen, but I think that it is being pushed as a concept not to really explain what goes on in the human brain, but instead to explain how you should let a cop off from having killed someone.
So even if it did happen the way he said, which I have heard from experts who said that it is possible that that could happen. Okay, it happened. But that's not, the real problem is he wasn't, reports, Tulsa paper is reporting that he was not trained. That's a lie that he received that training.
For the firearms.
And for the firearms. And the paperwork that they have that says he was trained was forged. And that people got fired who wouldn't sign off on saying that he got the training he said he got. So this is being reported by the Tulsa, what's the name of the
Tulsa World, and they didn't report that they were fired. They said that they were reassigned to less plum assignments because they refused to sign off on this paperwork that said he had gone through the training. So they refused to sign off on it. They said he didn't go through it. They were reassigned, and then the papers were signed by somebody.
So this is according to the Tulsa World newspaper. Nobody is suing them for libel.
Not yet.
Right? So I'm going to go with that story until somebody refutes it. But the bigger point is that this guy, I've seen him on television with his lawyer saying this is just a mistake, like when a doctor makes a mistake. It's not criminal. That is not the same thing. If you remember in San Francisco, the BART cop who thought he was pulling his taser out and shot that guy in his back while he was down on the ground and killed him, he legitimately, everybody agreed, he made a mistake and grabbed his gun instead of his taser. He was charged with second-degree manslaughter and convicted. That's called second-degree manslaughter. That's what this guy's being charged with, and and he did commit that crime. And this is why, this wasn't him trying to protect his community. This was him trying to get his jollies chasing after black guys. And that's what this was, okay? A rich guy wanting to get his jollies, pretending he was a cop, and he kills someone because he doesn't have the training, and this is all for fun and games. So that's what's really wrong here. I'm guessing Matt Lauer didn't make that point.
No, he didn't make that point. Now, he did. The man, Robert Bates, did have an opportunity to explain that aspect, the questions about whether or not his paperwork was in order. So this is what he had to say about it.
Without getting off on a tangent, you did the training and you can prove that you were certified.
That is absolutely the truth. I have it in writing.
Matt, if I might address just briefly that point, the so-called evidence of falsified training records comes from a person that was terminated by the sheriff's office 7 years ago. He signed an affidavit. Mr. Bates would have been with the department as a reserve just about a half a year or a year at that time. So 7 years ago, that's their evidence. And he is a person represented by the firm that's representing the family.
Right.
And he has, a year ago, been charged with first-degree murder. So that the credibility of the witnesses should have been, or that particular witness should have been weighed carefully by press outlets.
So if this guy's, he wants to dismiss the guy who made that accusation because he's been charged with a crime. This guy's also been charged with a crime. So we should dismiss him out of it. So they should cancel. We can't believe anything this guy's saying because he's been charged with a crime. If that's your litmus test, if you should believe someone's testimony, if they've ever been charged with a crime.
Yeah. By the way, so since we've been sort of analyzing what Matt Lauer should or shouldn't be asking, I love that he says, not to get off on a tangent, you're allowed. When it comes to whether or not he forged his certification papers, you can go off on a brief tangent, Matt Lauer. That's okay.
And note what he says. He says, I have it in writing, and that doesn't actually prove that he actually did the training. That's the whole contingent right here is that people are talking about is this is not, just because somebody signed off on it and that's in writing, that doesn't actually mean diddly squat.
Yeah. And also, look, I mean, it might come out that the reports that have been handed into the Tulsa World News, they've been anonymous. It might turn out that they're not true. But so far, they haven't really presented any hard evidence that he did actually do the training, aside from the paperwork in question. But let's say that they did actually forge it back in 2007, 2008. His goal is to get the experience of having been a cop. You didn't find time in 8 years to make up for those classes? That's not part of the experience to you, to fire your gun down the range a couple of times?
He apparently didn't feel that was necessary. If it turns out that he did not do the training, and
they didn't have to redo it in all of that time. 8 years, you don't do a recertification.
By the way, for federal agents, federal law enforcement agents, you have to retire at 57. For most local municipalities, 62. You have to retire. You can't be on the chasing bad guys with a gun. If you're this guy's 73, and the reason he's 73. So what's 73 minus 57?
Oh God, man.
It's a lot of years. It's a lot of guys. What's fucking? And it's a lot of years.
Yeah.
So this guy shouldn't even be out there, and this points to even bigger corruption inside that police department. Because if you're going to let a guy have a gun when he's 73 years old and chase bad guys, which is 16, 17. So he's 17 years older than the federal standard. 17 years, that's almost a whole career older.
You could almost go to Iraq and serve your country.
Oh, yes.
In the difference.
Right, so what I'm saying is that this shows the corruption because the way he got that gun and that badge and the ability to be on a sting operation and shoot a guy who's unarmed in the back and kill him and have it be the second worst thing that ever happened to him. The reason why is because he gave money. He's giving money to the police department. So they need him. He's giving them all their money. So now the chain of command is obliterated. There's no chain, because now the sheriff isn't going to tell that guy to shut up because that guy's giving the sheriff hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And chaired his re-election committee.
And chairing his re-election committee. So there's no chain of command. So that guy who shouldn't even be on that sting operation is going to be on that sting operation because nobody's going to tell him he can't, because then he'll stop giving them money and he'll find another sheriff in another town to give him money to so he can go chase bad black guys with a gun. That's what this is about. And that's why so the bigger story is the corruption inside the police department. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm interested in finding out about, because obviously, you know, if you're going to donate to the sheriff's re-election campaign, if you're going to give the department a lot of money, and, you know, and he did have a response to that. He said that, you know, he added that his main motivation was just to help the department when in a time of need, when they needed this equipment, you know, that was something that he wanted to help them with, and that was not to pay to play.
They probably did have need. We know that police departments around the country are facing massive cutbacks because of taxes being cut across the country effectively. But that doesn't mean you can't set up some sort of safeguards between the person who gives you the resources and the person who will then strap on those resources and walk the streets of the town.
Yeah, I think if you donate money to the police department, you're not allowed to then go be a pretend cop.
Yeah, that seems like that's silly. But it does sound...
You can go to the cop's ball at the end of the year. You can schmooze with them, perhaps, but you shouldn't be wielding a firearm.
Yeah, it just seems to me that there should be an investigation going farther up the food chain on this, because somebody had to sign off, somebody had to know about it, somebody had to reassign, as alleged, those other police officers that said that they wouldn't sign off on his paperwork saying he did the training. So, you know, how high does this go? How deep does this go? How many other people have infiltrated the department in Tulsa, for example? And what about other states? Does anybody else looking into this idea of donations? And, you know, we do know that in Arizona, there are a lot of reserve deputies that are being brought into service in Maricopa County with Judge Arpaio, who's now in trouble with the Justice Department. You know, so there's all kinds of places, I think, where this kind of program can really get out of hand. And I don't think anybody's paying attention to this. And it's unfortunate somebody like, you know, Eric Harris had to die for this so that we could find out this is going on.